Today on Locked On Canadiens, it is part one of our live post-draft extravaganza.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1100 of Locked On Canadiens. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day every single day here, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Laura Saab, also known as the Active Stick, and today I am joined by the wonderful Scott Matla of Habs Eyes on the Prize and our good friend Ian Boisvert of The Build. Without further ado, here is part one of our live episode in which we broke down everything that happened on draft weekend. And we are live. Welcome to our post-draft episode where we are breaking down what happened at the draft, how excited we are about Demidov. I don't think that's going to get old. And then some of the stuff that the Canadiens did on day two, as well as trades that may or may not have taken place, and things the Habs were not involved in that we were kind of relieved that they were not involved in. And I see my wonderful co-host Scott Matla dancing around and our good friend Ian Boisvert getting ready to chat. So gentlemen, take it away. I don't know who wants to start with the reaction, but let's just, talk about our Ivan Demidov feelings.
This was outstanding, everybody. We're just going to jump right into this. I have taken a nap. I am energized. I had a little bit of ice cream. I had a snack. I pet a cat. We are ready for this. And we will get into like the nitty gritty of all the draft and everything in here, I promise. But the Canadiens with their first two picks, and Laura and I talked about this in last night's show, knocked it out of the park with their first round, that the rest of the draft almost became irrelevant afterwards or after that fact because of how well they did, that they could afford some risks. And Ivan Demidov and Michael Hage as your first two picks in this draft is outstanding business by Kent Hughes. Really, really good business. A first round and beyond that could have potentially rivaled 2022. I don't think it will at the end of the day here, but a really strong first round. So excited about this.
Are we back? Are the Canadiens capital B back? It feels like we're back. Like, I don't know when you were certain the pick was going to be Ivan Demidov. For me, it was when Celine Dion was announced, because they were not going to stick her with a pick that we were all upset about, right? Like that, to me, they weren't going to do that to her. The second she was there, I went, we're going to be okay. They're going to do the right thing and give her an absolute baller of a pick. And they did, and she nailed that. The drama of that moment was awesome. It was one of the I tweeted afterwards. I didn't say it was a great pick. I said it was a great moment. The Canadiens really capitalized on that as we are the Montreal Canadiens. We matter again. Here's our pick. You should all be very scared about what we're building.
I have two thoughts, none of which are related to the actual pick itself, which I've said rules, is that one, Chantal Macabay having just Celine Dion in her phone to be able to be like, hey, we need a favor, and to make that happen, with the idea coming from the former AHL communications coordinator, Charles Sandin Courtois, who I dealt with a lot with the Rocket and the Ice Caps, is incredible. And it's a double middle finger to the Vegas Golden Knights, who tried to make Celine Dion their thing during the playoffs, so much so that they forgot to get, Celine Dion and her company's approval to do these things, and then had got a cease and desist about it, and then lost that series hilariously to the Dominique Ducharme-led Montreal Canadiens, which, if you remember, they got there because Toronto blew a 3-1 lead. And speaking of blowing a 3-1 lead, Michael Hage, in his press conference after being picked, put on a full Habs fan, which he is, an elite hater press conference in which he talked about being sad that Carey Price was hurt. about how the pain he felt and about how Toronto blew a 3-1 lead. And I did not think I could actually love this kid anymore going into this before he just came in and he's like, yeah, so Toronto sucks, huh? And not really. I'm very, very paraphrasing this. Don't radio me on this, but outstanding stuff. The Celine Dion thing, Ian, like you said, is a huge moment. Is that I be living in America, don't fully understand that Celine Dion is a very, very, very big deal in Quebec, which I kind of knew, but like definitively know that now, like internationally, to have that moment is beyond words incredible. Like that's what people are going to talk about when Ivan Demidov gets ready to make his debut is, hey, Celine Dion introduced this kid and here we are, a year from now, potentially.
And he said it was like a book. It was like a movie. It was like a fairy tale. Like this kid, I think, was ready to be a Montreal Canadien. He did have an idea of their interest. And we will get into that athletic article with the in-depth, the storyline behind them not even going to see him in Florida.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a second, because I love that. Because he, they asked him, do you even know who she is? Like, are you too young for that? And he was like, I know who she is. Celine Dion is a big deal. It's just like, imagine you get onto the stage, you get welcomed to the NHL, and then like the first person or like one of the first people whose hands you shake is one of the biggest pop superstars in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I just like the way that he handled it. Like, he's so good with the spotlight, and he was talking in his second language, which I found out that he only started learning a year and a half ago, and he did an amazing job. Obviously, he knows all the hockey terms and stuff like that, but just he just kept saying, like if he needed somebody to repeat a question, he just said he didn't understand. He tried to find the words. Like, he has no lack of confidence whatsoever, and that to me was one of the biggest things. Is like, this kid is prepared. He is ready to be a Montreal Canadien when his contract runs out.
He also learned introductions in French, in that he had no idea that the Canadiens were actually going to pick him here. He could have had the implication of it. He went out and did that with that potentially being available to him, or a thing that he could have done, which is next level. That's a kid who this is, and it's different from Michkov, is that this is a kid who thrives in the spotlight. He has that mentality that he wants to play in the spotlight, and you're not going to find that almost anywhere else but in Montreal. And that is I'm so blown away by every bit that I've seen of this kid. On the ice, I knew he was incredible. Off the ice, he, in the 24 hours or so that we've had this child in our organization, I will defend him with my life at this point. It's so good. Yeah. It's simplistic in what I'm saying, but I can't stop smiling about this. It is a near perfect first round for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, he and Slavkovsky seem to have that same juice, right? Like that whole, I'm going to play in the biggest market because I can play in the biggest market. I think I think the Canadiens under Hughes and Gorton and Bobroff, they've really valued that. And, sometimes it looks like they value it a little too much, but you don't have to look very far across the NHL for guys who can't handle the moment. And if you can have a couple of those, if you insulate them with guys like Slavkovsky or guys like Demidov, who look like, at least right now, that they're going to be able to handle those moments, it becomes, something we'll have to learn about as we watch these players develop more. But yeah, it really seems like the Canadiens have a type with that first, when they have a pick of that kind of magnitude, that they want it to be somebody who, when the puck is on their stick in the third period of a playoff game, they're not worried about them getting the yips. Like, they're going to be fine. It's not going to be, the guy's having a terrible summer and he's going to have a worse one, but Mitch Marner, it's not going to be him in an empty Bell Center hucking the puck out. He's got nobody on him, and he puts the puck over the glass for a penalty. Like, that stuff matters. We're seeing it more and more. Like the Panthers, as much as it looked like they were choking, they did end up pulling it back together. They don't have a ton of those guys that have the yips, right? Like, so I think that that's a huge part of the Demidov experience to me. Bobroff said that he's built for the big moments. I really hope we see some big moments soon. I love the draft. I am tired of caring this much about the NHL entry draft. We need to get to a point where this isn't important. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is where you go to get tickets to any event you want, like Major League Baseball games in the summer, concerts, comedy shows, anything that's going on near you. Gametime is the app you need to get everything. They have last minute deals, they have zone deals, they have flash deals, they've got all-in pricing. And what all-in pricing means is that there's no hidden fees. You know what you're going to pay up front. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. They have the view from your seat, literally everything that you need from a ticket buying app. Gametime has it, and it takes all the stress out of it and makes it so simple. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or any tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
And I look at getting Hage in here too, and I look at the question he answered that kind of sold the Canadians on him, that if your teammate comes back at 3 a.m. and the coach asks you, hey, was he? He's like, no, he was with me, until it becomes a problem. That this is a guy that wants to go into everything with his teammates, with his line mates, with whomever. And like our comments are saying that, his father passed away, less than a year ago in a tragic accident. And that forces a lot of younger people to grow up faster than you might expect. And that shows in what Hage was talking about. Demidov is phenomenal. The skill, probably one of the as they said, probably the second best player in this draft that fell for reasons.
Thank you, Anaheim. Thank you, Chicago.
Oh, yes.
Dude.
Well, we will get to winners and losers in this, but I look at Hage and I go, this is someone that I think I believe he's going back to Chicago this year, but I've seen it both ways, that he might go to Michigan early. He might stay with Chicago another year. Regardless of where he goes, this is going to be a guy that they are going to count on very heavily to be a leader on this team. And I think he can do that. And I think he's got the skill and the talent to really, truly make an impact. And based on the interviews, Demidov won't be at rookie camp next week. And I believe Aatos Koivu will also not be at rookie camp next week. A lot of eyes are going to be on Michael Hage now, too, because he's that guy coming in from this draft, that first-round pick. You might see Lane Hudson there. You're probably going to see Luke Tuck there, maybe some other guys, but the eyes are going to be on him now. And then when Demidov does eventually make his way over here at the end of next year, is going to be incredible. But I love Michael Hage, and I love that it is a swing on skilled character. And that's something we're going to talk a lot about with some of these other guys here, is there's talent and there is the intangibles off the ice that go along with that. Taking a swing on that, I don't mind taking a swing on character if that's not all that's there and offered by this player. And I think that's huge for the Canadiens.
And I think like the particular thing about the first round, I know we're going to get into a little bit later, is, Ivan Demidov was ranked second on many, many boards, so many boards. In fact, most of the boards that ranked him below second were like, these are predictions as to who's going to take him, right? And then with Michael Hage, it was a little bit more all over the place, but there were a lot that had him ranked in the top 20, as high as 15th, 14th. So I do feel that both of the picks that the Canadiens got in the first round are, like, you can consider them solidly, you can consider them steals, right? Like, to me, like, they got great value.
Their first round was legitimately to pick. I thought Hage would be gone by the time they got there. The fact that Hugh said he was the last guy that we wanted at that pick, and then we would have traded it. And you know what? I get why. I would have liked that they had picked Greentree there if Hage was gone, but that's ifs and nuts, etc. But it's nice that the Canadiens are the team taking advantage of other people sleeping on players or passing on players and turning that into their own personal gain. We saw it with Cole Caulfield all those years ago, and now you have Demidov and you have Hage. You have a guy like Lane Hudson coming up. You have Owen Beck, who probably shouldn't have been a second-round pick. If you listen to Lauren Kelly talk about it, Tampa could probably use a guy like Owen Beck right now, but too bad, so sad. RIP, whatever. We talked a lot about the first round. They didn't have a second round pick in this draft this year, which is normally where we've seen the Canadiens really do some damage in years past. They didn't have an early second round pick because they traded it for Christian Dvorak, and that ended up in a deal which sent Pierre-Luc Dubois to LA, which ended up going back to Winnipeg. So Winnipeg had that pick, and the Canadiens pick that they got from Colorado, I believe, was traded to move up to 21st overall. No second round picks. Kind of missed out on some guys I probably would have enjoyed in there. Andrew Basha being the big one, who went at 41. The Canadiens, I believe, would have picked at 40th if I have my potential. No, they would have picked at 37th, and he would have been available. Besides the point, because at the start of the third round, with their first pick in the third round, 70th overall, I nearly knocked over my entire desk when the Montreal Canadiens announced that they were selecting forward from TPS Turku, Aatos Koivu, and that I could not believe that they actually did it. I thought it was going to be a long shot, that they might wait too long, that someone else would swoop in and do it. But Saku Koivu's son now plays for the Montreal Canadiens, and that alone, the first three picks being that in this draft, I know I said the first two picks didn't make anything else matter, but those first three picks, Kent Hughes could probably get a statue built of himself right now if he really wanted to from the Habs fan base. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that was, I mean, again, talking not in terms of picks, talking in terms of moments. That is another moment, right? Like that is another thing that even if Koivu doesn't materialize into an NHL player, that's a moment we all got, right? Like we get to talk about a Koivu in Montreal again. That's really cool, right? Like we're all of a certain age where, you know, Saku was a big part. He was a big part of my childhood, right? Like the early parts of my hockey adventure started with Saku. He was at the first game I ever went to on Long Island. You know, so it's really cool to have that name around again. You know, he's about the same build as his dad. He shoots right instead of left. From what I can read about his, you know, his tendencies on the ice, he seems to shoot too much. His shot is probably, you know, going off of the Elite Prospects Guide, is probably his best tool, but there are some thoughts that maybe he's shooting a little too much and he can defer, which doesn't that sound like a great problem for the Canadiens to have? It seems like they have the opposite problem now where they all defer to each other. No, you shoot it. You shoot it. Like having one guy on there who's going to say, nah, I'm going to shoot it. That's really cool. So I hope that, you know, again, Adam Nicholas, until he fails us, I'm going to believe he can make something out of everything. And I'm really excited for this player.
I looked at Lassie Allen from Elite Prospects, tweeted out his chart that it's like he does a lot on the power play. He has some very strong defensive tendencies that it's like, okay, he's continued to kind of grow up. Like I'm looking at his stats from last year to this year where he joined the under 18 team and all the way up to the under 20 team. He wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire in previous seasons. And then this year took a step forward and earned himself a 4-game cup of coffee with the men's team at the top of Liga there. And I love that there's so much history with this name. But then I watch play, I'm like, there is a base to build on here. And this is my analytical brain going into this. And you, like you said, that Adam Nicholas and the player development staff has a very good piece to work with here. There is skill. There is very good skating. There's a guy who knows how to read the play, who can shoot the puck pretty well on the power play. Like you said, instead of deferring and passing, just friggin' rip the puck one time. Demidov wants to control the puck. He wants the puck on his stick. He wants to score. Love that. That's great. Adding more players who have a more assertive tendency is never going to be a bad thing. And I'm going to turn the analytical brain off. They drafted Saku Koivu's son for the Montreal Canadiens. He was so surprised that his mother was the one who saw the draft pick. Not Saku, not him, his mother. And she's the one who started freaking out back in Finland. It's incredible. And that it's going to be great because by the time he's probably getting to the NHL level, Brendan Gallagher will be retired and number 11 will be available again. And I'm not saying that he has to wear it, but I'm not saying that as well.
I think one of the things that I like about this pick is that, it is a third rounder. It's not like he wasn't like this player that they reached on, but at the same time, like most scouts believe that he still has a lot of potential to grow, like in terms of his body, but as well as his skill, right? Like a lot of people, we're talking about like we might not even have scratched the surface with Aatos Koivu at this point. So like you guys said, we're going to put our faith in Adam Nicholas and we are going to hope that it materializes into something. But I'm glad that they gave us the moment, but at the appropriate moment.
Right.
Yeah, it's 70th overall. Was it a little bit of reach? Yeah. Do I care at all? No. Aatos Koivu is a Montreal Canadien. I don't care. They earned a little bit of a reach as a treat with their first 2 picks in this draft here. Like, I do not care about that. And then from here, things get a little bit more into the weeds that I'm not a prospects expert. I just play one on a podcast here. But as it says on the side here on YouTube, and for those of you who are going to listen to this show later on in the week here when we post this as an audio format, it just says, who the heck are these other guys? And to be honest, yeah, who the heck are some of these other guys? There was a theme that I got through this, and from reading people like Chris Peters, who has a bigger ear to the ground for these junior leagues and into the NCAA. The next pick was Logan Sawyer, which was not a name I was expecting, but do-it-all winger built on work ethic and motor, constantly looking to pull defenders off the puck. Tactical pace increases allow for deft entries into soft space where you can work on passing and shooting. They went for a guy with this pick who works hard. And when you work hard, you become a coach favorite very, very quickly. There's a reason why Raphael Harvey-Pinard went from 4th line AHLer to top line Montreal Canadiens winger because, one, everyone got COVID or hurt, but also because he worked his ass off. There's a reason why Brendan Gallagher, being 5'9", went to being a top 6 NHL forward and one of the best shot or scoring chance creators in the NHL. It's because he works. And Logan Sawyer seems like that guy. He put up a lot of good points in his junior A league there in the AJHL before a whole bunch of political nonsense forced them to join the BCHL. He's going to the NCAA. And there will be a trend that we notice in here. The Canadiens did not pick a lot of people from the CHL this year. They picked 2 players. And I think that they are giving their prospects a much longer runway to develop. And I think Logan Sawyer is one of those guys that his work ethic, he's going to play in the BCHL again next year and then go to the college after that. There's time, and it allows the Canadiens runway to analyze and work with these prospects. The more that I read about him, the more excited I am because, again, you're building off of early strong base. You're not this man large draft, this man fast draft. You have a guy who is 6'1", he's not small, and he works his ass off. I love that. And that's a huge plus for me.
Yeah. Last year's draft, could be categorized by defensemen and goalies. This year, they really leaned into the forward aspect of this. Their first 3 picks were forwards before we get to a defenseman. I think that's telling to me. I also think it's funny just as a draft, like we were told headed in, like, man, it could be really defense heavy first. And we got to pick 6 and there was 1 defenseman off the board. It definitely didn't happen the way that a lot of people thought it would. So yeah, I again, the who are these guys again is an apt description of the back, 3 or 4 rounds of any NHL draft. There are too many junior leagues for people to be watching all of them. That's why I trust experts like the guys at Elite Prospects or, Locked On, Hockey Prospects. That show's wonderful. So yeah, I mean, like, again, it seems like they took a swing on upside in a lot of instances, right? Like, which is really refreshing because we're so used to both this at this front office at certain points and, the front office of the past, where the bets were always on floor. It's like, let's just take the guy who we feel like is the safest, and let's just, let's hope that he hits, even though it's probably not going to. What happens with a lot of those is if they don't hit that floor, because that's still a possibility, right? It's a theoretical floor. When you don't hit that floor, then you've completely wasted a draft pick. Jesperi Kotkaniemi is someone that I look at in that instance, right? Like, they picked for floor instead of upside, like a Brady Tkachuk, who even at the moment, Brady Tkachuk, we were all saying was a better player. So it's really refreshing that this draft, they seem to just keep swinging for what we think these guys are capable of at their peak. And we're going to do everything we can to get them there. It's a bet on themselves as an organization as much as it is on these players as individual players, which is refreshing. It's really nice to see that happen.
And the thing is, this continues into the next pick here, is that I look at Owen Protz, and if I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sorry, but apparently he's an inch taller and slightly lighter than he was listed on Elite Prospects. But I read the first part of his description that says he holds a monopoly on violence, smart violence. And the thing is, I read from Mitch Brown, someone who's watched a lot more of this player here, and I look at this and I smile and I go, their floor is probably being a 5'6" defenseman in the NHL who loves to play physically, but smart physically. Mm-hmm. And all I could think is, yes, guys that get you into the playoffs, guys that get you through the playoffs. If you're throwing a guy out there like Owen Protz, and I think Radko Gudas, and I know that's a lofty comparison here. You're tired and it's a third period of a playoff game and you need a goal and you're going to enter the zone and you see this Gimli height dude at the blue line waiting for you. Do you really want to go for it at that point when you've done this for 7 games? And Owen Protz reads to me as he's Arbor Jackeye with restraint. And that to me is so enticing that the offensive upside is maybe not the same, but there is no shame in a very solid defensive defenseman who can move the puck out smartly, even if they don't put up a ton of points. That's what David Savard did when he was in his prime, is maybe not a ton of points, but he was the reliable guy back there. Maybe not as angry physical as this. I want to go watch some of the highlights from this, because if anyone says smart violence, I want to know what that's about. And again, not an overly large dude, which tells me they're drafting based on a skill set here. And they probably got a good look at him watching Florian Jackeye this year. He played it with him in Brantford. This is a guy that wasn't an off the board thing. They identified him probably very early on watching Jackeye play there.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned smart violence. The opposite obviously would be dumb violence. And I don't think Jackeye is there. Jackeye's done a better job picking his spots lately. I want to take you back to a dark moment. The 2014 Eastern Conference Final against the New York Rangers. Laura, it's laughing because I think you already know what moment I'm going to talk about. The current head coach of the Montreal Canadiens scored an overtime winner against Montreal. He beat Dustin Tokarski, and he was left wide open. And the reason he was wide open, and now you know, Alexei Emelin went across the ice to finish a check. And it was a big hit. And guess what it was? Dumb. It was stupid. This guy seems like he's not going to do that sort of thing, where you get so caught up in the weeds of I'm going to hurt somebody, where you end up hurting your own team. Remember, it was this year, another example of dumb violence. Jacob Trouba in that series against Florida, I think it was in the last game. He has 2 guys coming in on him on a rush, and he decides, I'm going to hit one of you, and he steps up and he misses both of them. Like, that's another example of that. These are things you can't do. If this, if smart violence is what this guy is known for, and he can provide that, he will find a role in the NHL, right? Like, there are teams who are going to leave spots open for players like this. So it's an exciting, the elevator pitch on Elite Prospects is the most violent player on the ice at any given time. That's really cool to have.
Sold.
Yeah.
Absolutely sold on that. And the thing is, again, I love a player that they have a base to build on here. They're like, there's a solid player that we are expanding on here. We don't need to fix the hockey sense or anything. That the hockey sense seemingly is there, and it's working on where his hand positioning is when he's shooting or passing the puck to make him a little bit more malleable in that. You can absolutely do that. with a team here. You can't always teach up here a lot. You can work on it. And this leads me to the last pick that I'm kind of intrigued by. Everything else is a little bit of a mismatch that you're throwing darts at the board and hoping something hits. Tyler Thorpe, who will be 19 in August. He's gigantic. He's 6'4", 212 pounds. And he's apparently a very good just catch and release shooter with Vancouver in the WHL right now. 23 goals, 21 assists in 51 games. He is I'm very curious to see if this is a skating thing. And Ian, I don't know if you have the guide up for more that's in there. Knack for deflections, bolstered by between checks positioning. This is a guy who uses his frame. I wrote Caden Lindstrom's profile for Eyes on the Prize. And the biggest thing is he uses his frame effectively. When you're this big, if you cannot use your frame effectively because you aren't used to, you haven't grown into it, or you're not strong enough, you are becoming basically what is a pylon on the ice there. I remember Michael McCarron when he wasn't quite hitting his stride and all he did then was fight people. As soon as he learned to leverage the fact that he is Marshall Erickson, but 6'7", really turned out in his favor. And now he's an everyday NHL player years later.
Yeah. You can't be big for nothing. You have to be big for a reason. Like that was the big turning point in McCarron's career. I don't think it was something that Jared Tenorti learned until a very, very, very much later. So yeah, I completely agree. They call him a towering winger with an NHL shot. That's fun, right? Like the size doesn't. We always get into this argument because teams overemphasize size. Size doesn't immediately mean bad, but size can't be the only thing you bring to the table. He's big and he has a good shot and he's very physical. That's what I read from his guide. Like you can build a player around that. You can help round out some of the other parts of his game. But if he's doing these things, he can make it in the NHL, AHL. These guys they're trying to make a professional career in hockey. Even if it doesn't end in the NHL, it's still, something that they can achieve in other ways.
I'm actually just kind of scrolling through because I'm looking at some of the questions that are popping up here. I don't know much about the goalie. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about this goalie because I can't find anything right now in a cursory search, and I'm not going to bore you all while I do that.
There are no scouting reports on him.
Yeah, that'll be. We're going to get an email from Latvia, asking, giving us everything, which would be fantastic. The last two picks are just here. There's also Ben Merrill, who, like I said, is gigantic. Legitimately gigantic, but also called one of the worst skaters in the draft. But you can fix that because apparently the hockey sense is there and the skill set is there. It's just he's not a very good skater. You can fix that. Makar Kanan and Rasmus Bergquist. You know what? I liked Kanan's numbers in the MHL and he had good VHL numbers. They probably saw him when they were seeing Konyushkov, seeing Yevgeny Volokin, and probably scouting Demidov now. And Bergquist, they probably saw during some of those series for Engstrom over in the SHL. I'm going to defer to their judgment on this. And Robert Rice put this best on Twitter is that the draft has been over for 5 minutes. You can't judge any of these players. We didn't think Adam Engstrom was going to become much of anything. And now look at where he's at. We didn't know what Alexander Romanov was going to be. And look at where he is at years later. Brendan Gallagher was a 5th round pick. Jake Evans was one of the last picks in the draft. Caden Primo was one of the last picks in the draft who had terrible USHL numbers. And look at where he's at now. It's very easy to have an immediate judgment on this. And like I said, I put that dividing line right at Owen Protz because I think that's where people started either to hate it or were okay with where they are at. It's a pretty solid A draft for me for the Montreal Canadiens. I think that this is one of the best drafts that we've had in recent years. 2022, I still think, is at the top there. Those first 4 picks, all being potential NHL players, good NHL players, sets it apart. But the first round, this is probably arguably the best first round the Canadiens have had since 2007. And that's a long, long way back. So
yeah, it's the buzz in this fan base is palpable, right? Like you can feel it. Everyone's a little high on their own supply at the moment. Like we're all very, very happy with the way things have rolled out for the Canadiens in this draft. There's still a pretty important offseason ahead of this team. there's still a lot of questions on certain trade targets that Montreal may or may not be interested in. There was I think Arpin Basu and The Athletic had the intel that if Demidov wasn't available at 5, they had a trade in the chamber for a forward, and it may or may not have included that 5th overall pick. So like there was a backup plan in case they didn't get Demidov. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the summer plays out. Like this was a huge win for them. I can't wait to get the draft video that they usually put out, because it's going to be a massive victory lap for that front office, and they absolutely deserve it. Like we if they victory lapped and it was a terrible draft, they would hear it from all of us. They've earned whatever kind of pat on the back they give themselves.
Thank you so much for listening to part 1. Part 2 is coming up right up now, and don't miss that because there is a very special announcement at the end of that episode. As always, you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at @LO_Canadians. You can email us at lockdowncanadians@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and do not forget to tune in to our next episode, which is part 2 of our live show.